You are listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcast, the only podcast covering all of your teams. Bringing you the best sports news from the state of Georgia, from the professional ranks to the high school levels, we have it all. Welcome back to the Atlanta Sports Podcast. My name is Frankie Maloof, and I'm joined by Luke Winstel over the phone. And a little bit later, we're going to be joined by Buck Lanford from Fox 5. We're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons today. We're going to recap the Atlanta versus Seattle game last Saturday, and we're going to do a little preview for this weekend's Atlanta Falcons versus Green Bay Packers game in the Georgia Dome, which will be the final game in the Georgia Dome played by the Atlanta Falcons. But before we get to that, I want to thank you for finding us, whether it be on Twitter, where you can follow us at ATL Sportscasts, or on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. We're also in most of the major directories, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and we also have a YouTube channel, so thank you for finding us there. So the Falcons beat the Seattle Seahawks 36-20 on Saturday in the divisional round in the Georgia Dome. The stadium was electric, just so you could see it by just watching TV, all the towels waving. Biggest crowd I've seen at Georgia Dome for a Falcons game in a long time. Atmosphere was great. The Falcons responded with a great win. Started slow, but they rebounded back.
That game against the Seahawks was awesome. And the coolest thing about the fans being there, being loud and electric, is that Dan Quinn gives them credit for it. He says, hey fans, you guys have a chance to impact the game. And after the game, that's one of the first things he said, is how big of an impact it was. And to all the fans out there with tickets to this game against Green Bay, if you're going to sell them to Falcons fans and not Packers fans, because we got to keep that home field advantage. So do your part and go if you possibly can and be as loud as possible, because Dan Quinn knows and he realizes it. I think a lot of coaches don't, but that home field advantage could be huge in this game against Green Bay.
And you know, we were talking about it a few weeks ago, how if I had to choose a team to play in the playoffs, I would not choose the Packers. But since we do get them, we do get the home field advantage, so we got to take advantage of that advantage. We got to have all our fans there be loud, because, you know, Dan Quinn was up in Seattle where the crowd was really a big impact for them, and that's one reason that the Seahawks do so well at home is because of their crowd and their stadium. It's so tough to play in. If the Georgia Dome can be that hostile environment, that will be a huge boost to the Falcons and possibly give them a greater chance to win on Sunday.
Yeah, back when we were talking about that, you know, I haven't been afraid of Green Bay the whole time. I'm not that impressed by their overall team completeness, just because their defensive backs have been banged up, and their defense is just not all that great. They're good, but not great. And I think the Falcons will be able to shred them on offense and put up, 30-plus, just like they did the first time. And I think our defense and the Falcons' defense is going to have a pretty big task ahead of themselves. But they've been getting better. They've been making plays and turning the ball over. And with Aaron Rodgers, it's almost like a one-man show to me, because Jordy Nelson is hurt. It looks like he won't play, but there's a small possibility he might. Devontae Adams has been banged up for them. And, of course, their running backs are missing Eddie Lacy. They do have Christine Michael and Ty Montgomery, but they're not a huge threat to me, even though Montgomery is still pretty good. And I think if the Falcons can find a way, which Dan Quinn tends to do, to just kind of shut down Aaron Rodgers or minimize the effect as best they can, so the offense can go to work and win the game, I think the Falcons will be fine. I think, with Dallas having a two-headed monster, I'd be more scared of them than Green Bay. So I think that this will be fine for the Falcons, and I'm not quite as scared of Aaron Rodgers as most people are, just because I don't think he has the weapons around him to really shred the Falcons.
All right, so we're going to get into the interview with Buck Lanford again from Fox 5. He's the Good Day Atlanta news anchor in the weekday mornings. And before we do that, Luke, what were some of your favorite parts of the interview? What do you want people to pay attention to?
Well, we talked a good bit about some injuries and how Buck thinks they'll affect the Falcons and the Packers, and talked a little bit more about Kyle Shanahan with a report earlier today coming out that the 49ers want him to be their next head coach if they can get him. And we also talked about how the young defense will hold up against the Packers and how that can happen, and some things related to that. So those are some interesting parts I think you should pay attention to.
Yeah, and he also puts predictions in it at the very end, so make sure you listen all the way through. And then he also talks about the MVP conversation at the beginning. Those are both very interesting. And I also like his keys to the game, so that's, again, closer to the end as well. So make sure you listen to the whole thing. And now here's Buck. Now we are very happy to be joined by Buck Lanford, former Fox 5 weekend sports anchor and current news anchor on weekday mornings for Good Day Atlanta on Fox 5. Buck, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, Frankie, glad to be here. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. So we're going to start off with a conversation that a lot of Atlanta Falcon fans are talking about right now. Matt Ryan and the MVP conversation. In your opinion, is he the MVP?
I think he makes a strong case for it. I think, in my opinion, as a guy from Atlanta, that's probably, I'll probably take that into account as well. I'd say yes, he is the MVP. If the MVP is truly the most valuable player, and you say how good would that team be without that player, I think you could make a strong case for him. And I think he's having the best season he's had, and I would not be surprised at all if he wins the most valuable player award.
So Kyle Shanahan has been a big part to the Falcons offense, and he's been one of the main reasons Matt Ryan has had a career year, in my opinion. So how valuable do you think he is to the Falcons in their offense?
Kyle, I think that here's the funny thing is that last year people were calling for Kyle Shanahan's head. They wanted him out of here. They thought he'd ruined Matt Ryan. And I think what we've seen is that it just took a little bit of time for these two guys to gel. What I am surprised about at this point, he's been in the conversation to, as a head coaching candidate for a lot of jobs. I'm surprised that somebody hasn't snatched him up, and I'm kind of happy that they haven't, because I think the two of those guys, if you look at what they were able to do from year one to year two, if they can do anything close to that or just make some slight improvements between year two and year three, the sky's the limit. So I'm very pleased. And I was one of those people. I wasn't so sure about Kyle Shanahan last year. I thought he might have come in and tried to do too much and tried to make Matt Ryan fit into his mold. But it's, he was right, obviously. And the Falcons made the right move in hiring him. And I think he might be an MVP as a coordinator too.
Yeah, one of the reasons we were asking that question is there was a report earlier today that the 49ers are trying to hone in on Shanahan to be their head coach going forward, but we were wondering how valuable you thought he was, just because I think it would be really tough for the Falcons to lose him.
Yeah, they certainly don't want to lose him, but you always know that's a possibility when you have a guy that is the hotshot coordinator. When you have an offense that makes a jump like this Falcons offense has done from last year to this year, then obviously people look at that and they're like, wait, who's the architect behind this? And I think the 49ers, if I'm not mistaken, that's the last job that hasn't been filled. So it wouldn't surprise me at all for the 49ers to hire Kyle Shanahan. But what does surprise me is that he wasn't hired before this.
What did you like most about Saturday's win over the Seahawks in the divisional round?
Oh man, I mean, that's a tough question, because there was so much to like about it. It was a great football game. I think what I like most about it is the fact that the Falcons just won and advanced and now have a chance to play at home for the Super Bowl. I thought that the defense, the Falcons, everybody talks about the Falcons offense, and rightfully so. They score more points than anybody else in the league. But I think the Falcons defense played very well in that game. If you look at the opening drive, you were like, yikes, this does not look good, because Seattle took the ball and marched it right down the field. The adjustments that the Falcons defense made and the way they played the rest of that game, that was the key to the win. And I think if I had to say what I liked the most, it's probably the defensive play outside of that opening drive, because I expected the Falcons offense to put up points like they did. I love the way that they were able to get pressure on Russell Wilson. I love, when Desmond Trufant went down, I was like, oh no. But this defense you can make the case, played better in his absence. And I think when you get him back, with this defense who now has a lot more confidence, these young players playing so aggressively and playing so well, this defense has grown up a lot this year. I think that in a couple of years down the road, this defense could be considered a part of the big strength of this team as well.
Did anything concern you during that game on Saturday?
The opening drive scared me to death. I was like, oh no. I mean, I have a lot of confidence in the Falcons offense that they can, if they have to, they can play, the outscoring game with any other offense in the league. And I felt like that would be the case, that they could do that. And literally when the way that opening drive was, the Seahawks made it look so easy. And here's what's more concerning than that is they chewed up so much clock on that opening drive. And part of the way to beat the Falcons would be to keep the ball out of their offense's hands. And I felt like maybe they almost robbed the Falcons of an extra possession in the game by the way they methodically moved the ball down the field and really just shoved it right down their throats. So I was concerned early, but the Falcons answered quickly in that opening, with their opening drive as well. And I think the way that they answered kind of put me at ease, and I felt pretty comfortable with it the rest of the way. I guess you could also say special teams were a little disconcerting. The way Devin Hester was able to return the ball. Falcons got a lot of breaks with some penalties that really saved them some field position. I don't remember Devin Hester. Of course, he was banged up a lot when his last year here, and I don't remember him being a potential game changer like he was in that game. So I'm hoping that was an anomaly. Devin Hester was very fired up, playing great, playing against his old team, excited to be here. I hope that's not something that we need to be super concerned about, special teams letdowns heading into this game with Green Bay.
Well, our next question was, starting strong, the Falcons close out the regular season well, but they start strong in every game. Then after deferring and allowing the Seahawks to go right down the field, you just talked about it. What does that show about this team that they were able to regain the momentum immediately and take control of the game?
Well, I would argue that drive that followed that, the Falcons' first offensive drive, I would argue that was probably the key or the most important drive of the game. The fact that they showed that they can answer, and they showed that they would answer. That was huge. It was huge from a fan perspective because you're like, okay, it's going to be okay. But I think it was huge from a player perspective too, just to give them some confidence and to let the defense know that the offense, hey, we got your back. Now go out there and play better, and we're going to win this football game. I think the way they responded to that, and that very next drive was probably one of the most important drives of the game, even though it was early in the game and it only tied the score to 7.
How do you think injuries will impact the Falcons in their playoff run? Because we know Adrian Claiborne's now out for the playoffs, and Julio's a little bit banged up, and then we're missing guys that have been out for the year, like Sean Weatherspoon, Derek Shelby, Desmond Trufant. So how do you think those injuries will impact the Falcons? Well,
I think injuries are, they're a part of the game in the NFL. Certainly at this point in the season, no team's playing at 100%. You could, the one that obviously probably scares people the most is Julio Jones because, it's been a nagging injury all year with that toe. But Julio is just such a special athlete. The way he plays is just, he's just better than anybody who covers him. But I would argue that Julio at 70% is probably better than most defensive backs that he goes up against. That was the one that bothers you the most. I love the way they responded to the loss of Sean Weatherspoon and Desmond Trufant because the defense has just literally shown that they've gotten better and better each week. Young guys like Deion Jones, Keanu Neal, those guys have just they've matured and they play such an aggressive style of football. The Julio Jones injury is the one that jumps off the page, and I think also the other side of that is you talk about Green Bay. Well, Jordy Nelson, they've got some injuries they're dealing with themselves. I think that perhaps the injury situation is a wash on both sides, and I think injuries are expected and are a part of the game. So I think that I don't think it will affect the Falcons any more than it will affect the Green Bay Packers in this NFC Championship game.
Yeah, so we were going to ask you how you thought the Packers players being banged up would impact that side of the game as well, but I guess you're saying that it'll just even out maybe?
I think it will. I think it will. I think that, Jordy Nelson is probably the Julio Jones of the Green Bay Packers, and here's what you see on both those teams, is they have so many weapons. Julio's so good, but Matt Ryan has hit 13 different guys or something like that this year, and Aaron Rodgers shows the ability to do the same thing. The play's never over with Aaron Rodgers. He's going to find a man. He makes his guys better. He makes his receivers better. Jordy Nelson's a special athlete. Julio Jones is a special athlete. But Matt Ryan will also find Toy Lolo. He'll find his guys as well, and he'll spread the ball around. So I think that, I think that injuries at this point in the year, as long as you're not losing your starting quarterback, I think that, or one of your key running backs, I think that both teams are deep enough in the receiving core to make it, pretty even on both sides, just dealing with injuries.
So what do you think about the Falcons' defense heading into this tough matchup? They're playing Aaron Rodgers, and the defense has been playing well recently. Do you think they'll be able to continue that? And what do you think they'll need to do to be able to slow down the Packers?
Well, I think that I think they will be able to continue that. We all remember just a few years ago when the Packers came here and the Falcons were riding high and feeling good about their playoff situation, and the Packers came in and just hit them right in the mouth, and that was one of the worst football games. I was there that night. It was one of the worst football games I can ever remember from a Falcons perspective, because it was over from the get-go. It felt like, pick sixes, and just it was a rough night. I think that the Falcons defense, I think that they've not only have they matured as the season's gone on, because they're young on the whole. Not only have they matured as the season's gone on, but every time they go out and play well, every time they go out and have a performance like they did against the Seahawks, they gain confidence, they gain experience. Young players aren't young players anymore. After 18, 19 weeks into the season, you're not you're a rookie technically, but you got a whole football season under your belt, and you're playing playoff football now, so you're hardly a rookie anymore. I think the key is to try to get pressure on Aaron Rodgers. And it's not an easy thing to do, because that guy moves around so well, and he's good at avoiding pressure. But I think they need to hit him, and they've shown an ability to do that. Early on in the game, they were struggling to get to Russell Wilson, but they were able to do that as well. And he's another, elusive quarterback. So I think that'll be the key, is guys like Vic Beasley getting back in the backfield and doing really what he's done all year long. He's a guy I haven't even mentioned yet, talking about this young defense who's played well. But the standout season that guy's had has really been incredible. So the one thing I would want for them to do is to put pressure on him, to hit him, to make him know they're there.
The defense is a big reason for the Falcons to win the NFC Championship, but what would happen if the Falcons were to lose? What would go wrong?
Turnovers is the one thing that I'd be concerned about. And that's, turnovers are always costly. Matt Ryan's protected the football a lot better this year than last year, and that's part of the reason that people are, you can make the case that he's having an MVP season. But yeah, I think turnovers or Aaron Rodgers just having one of those Aaron Rodgers superhuman nights. I think those would be the two things that concern me the most. Is protect the football, and somehow try to contain Aaron Rodgers. But I think if you get into a battle of scoring, I like the Falcons' chances in that too.
Do you have a prediction for the next 3 NFL playoff games, which the 2 championships and the Super Bowl?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. The homer in me, the home guy in me. Here's something that I've said, and I said it on social media, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense a little bit too. If you go back to the World Series, the Cubs won the World Series, right? And then Georgia Tech upsets Georgia, Army upsets Navy, Donald Trump upsets Hillary Clinton. I think the Falcons are going to the Super Bowl. I said that weeks and weeks ago. It just felt like the way things have gone this year, this is their year. So I like the Falcons to advance to the Super Bowl. And it's hard to bet against the New England Patriots. It's hard to bet against them. They've been there, they've done that, but I think that'll be a great game over in the AFC because both of the look at the 4 quarterbacks we're talking about here in these AFC and NFC championship games. I mean, you could obviously make the case that great quarterbacks is what gets great teams to this point, with Ben Roethlisberger and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's the only guy who doesn't have that Super Bowl ring yet. So if you're going to hold me to it, I'll say Patriots versus Falcons. And what the heck? Maybe this is the year the Falcons win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully this is the year. And before we let you go, where can fans follow you on social media?
I'm all over the place on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm at Buck Lanford Fox 5. And on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Buck Fox 5. And I'm very active on social media. As you mentioned earlier, I was a longtime sportscaster, but I still have that in my blood. And I do a lot of sports stuff on social media as well as different things as well. But I do a lot of sports things too. So, and I try to live tweet during a lot of these games and interact with people and just throw my thoughts out there and hear what other people are thinking too.
All right, Buck, thanks again for joining us today, and maybe we'll talk to you again sometime soon.
All right, rise up.
That just about does it today for the end of our show. And before we go, I want to thank you for finding us, whether it be on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com, on Twitter, at ATL Sportscasts, or in any of the major directories, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or on our YouTube channel. You can find links to all of those on our website. And you can also find our blog. We do try to blog a little bit on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. And you can also sign up for our newsletter there. We would appreciate it. And if you don't mind, you could leave us a review in one or more of those directories. Tell us how we're doing. We would love to hear from you. And also, if you have any friends that would like to know more about the Atlanta Hawks, Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta Braves, or any of the teams in the state of Georgia, please let them know about us. We would greatly appreciate it. And we hope to see you next week with another show.